What's up 3D designers, welcome to this new video. Today I thought I would create another tutorial, so I came up with an idea to create a modeling tutorial. This right here is a project I did a while back and it was called Crystal Gallery. And I created like various different crystals and basically showcased them in this fictional crystal gallery. And today I would like to take a look with you at this crystal right here and just show you how you can model this. So, without further ado, I think we can jump into Houdini. So, this setup started with a simple tube. So I created a tube with just 6 sides, so we have 6 columns, 2 rows. And we then transformed this thing a little down, and on the other side I created a platonic, and this platonic is a dodecahedron, and I then applied some normals and transformed this up a little. And the next thing we did was create a boolean, and this boolean operation is set to intersect, so it basically takes the area that's in between the tube and the dodecahedron, so we get exactly this shape right here. The next few operations were just to give my crystal another shape, so I wanted to push those points a little upwards so we get a more interesting shape, and also those points that are on the downside. So that's what I did with this edit sub, so I can show you the example right here. So I basically moved, you can see the difference right there, the points along those edges. So that's what I did right here. I just transformed a lot of those points along those edges to create some more interesting shapes. And I then added poly splits to again add some edges right here because those weren't there anymore. So that's that, and then I fused it to fuse some points and yeah, some edit subs. And after that, the important thing is to add a normal after that. So you are really free on how you want to create your crystal. You can basically start with another shape. You can layer shapes on top of each other, but that's just my personal preference. Again, like, feel free to play around with those things because that's really what where you can learn a lot of stuff. So don't just copy my settings, like try to experiment with it. So that's that. After that, wait a minute, let me turn that off. So after that, I took this whole thing into a VDB from polygons. So it's pretty dense. So we have 0.005 as a voxel size. So it's pretty high resolution right there. And now you can see that those faces are very flat. And I wanted to introduce some noise and yeah, some randomness. So I created a volume VOP because we have this volume. And what I've also forgot to say is in this VDB from polygons, we want to set this as a distance VDB. And the important thing here is to type in density instead of the default, which is the surface. And we want to set it to fill interior and 10 exterior band voxels. Worked fine for my case. So with that being said, let's dive into the volume VOP. Inside of this volume VOP, all we are doing is we take the position. Let me make some space right here. So we are taking the position of every point and we are adding it to a noise. So we are taking the position into an anti-aliased noise and fitting it between 0 and 1 to 0 and 1. And we are just adding this to the normal position and then plugging it into the sample position of the volume sample file. And what's also important is to take the op input 1 into the file name. Op input 1 is just the first input right here. So that just tells this node that it should take this model from above to yeah, make those adjustments. So that's it for the VOP. And after that, I actually created those little indents that we can see just to break up the edges and make the crystal look a little older, and it just adds a lot more realism to your scene. So how I created those little indents is what I'm going to show you right now. So I also started with this base model, and I then converted it to lines. So with the convert line node, that's what you get right here. So basically get the outline of the object. I then scattered some points on there, and I placed down an attribute randomize node, and I randomized the piece scale because I want to later copy some objects on there. So that means that those objects will inherit the randomized piece scale of the points. And I then also added a mobs randomize node, but that's optional. You don't really have to use it. It's actually a free plugin. You can install it if you want to, but I just thought it looked cool, but it's not essential right here. So after that, we copied some spheres onto those points, and I also added a mountain sub just to, add some displacement on the spheres, because otherwise we would just have spheres that are like basically subtracted from our normal shape, and I wanted to break this up a little bit. I then created a VDB out of them and took this whole thing into a VDB combine, and this VDB combine is basically saying subtract. So we are taking this block that we created, the base crystal, and we are subtracting those little indents from it. And I thought this looked quite cool to have basically the edges like broken up. After that, I converted the whole thing back to polygons. So now we have polygons again. I can show you this by enabling the wires. So it's now a normal mesh. And for good measure, just apply a normal sub at the end, just to be sure the normals aren't messed up. That's it for the base crystal. Now we can also create some other shapes. So actually in the end, I had my crystal with the stone, which we are also going to create in a few minutes. I had some intersections for the, basically it should show where the crystal already like cracked inside, and some bubbles inside, some air bubbles, which also just adds some more realism. And I just separated those out, so you can, if you want to shade them differently, you can do that. So now for the stone that you already saw in here, I can show you it again. So this stone right here, we want to create that, and I created this up here. So I just started with a simple sphere. I then made a transform node, and this transform is just basically dragging the sphere in the y-axis. So you can see this right here. We have 1.2 as a scale on the y-axis and only 0.6 on the x and z axis. And I then applied some normals and now a point warp, and the point warp is really doing the magic right here. So in this point warp, it's also really simple. We just take the position of every point, and we are taking an anti-aliased noise and a unified noise, adding those two together and using them as an amount for the displays along normal. And yeah, that's basically all it did. So we are taking the points of the mesh that isn't displaced yet, and we then add the noise value along the normals, if that makes sense. So that's that. After that, I created VDB from polygons just to make the whole thing, the whole mesh a little better. So I then converted it, and yeah, that's what we get right here. I then also applied a normal, and I think that's it for the stone. Now the other parts were the air bubbles. So the air bubbles are created right here. I'm basically taking our base, like really base shape, without the cracks and stuff. I take this shape and I'm creating an ISO offset from it and transforming it down a little bit, because I want to create bubbles, and those bubbles should be inside of the crystal, and otherwise they might be like sticking out or on the outside. So I then scatter some points inside this volume, and I copy some little spheres onto those points and apply mountain, And that's already it for the air bubbles, like very simple right here. And the last part is right here. So in here we are creating some intersections for our crystals, so those breakups that I already told you about. And I also did an ISO offset from the original shape right here, so the undisplaced version. And I'm scattering some points into the ISO offset, so just 4 points. And after that there is an attribute wrangle, and inside of this attribute wrangle I just typed in add orient. So the attribute orient is equal to a random at ptnum. So what this basically means is that we are taking the orientation, so this is an attribute for orientation. We're basically generating a random value for each point, because each point has a different point ID, so a different ptnum attribute. This means that also every point has a different orient attribute with this little expression right here. So after that we just copy grids onto those points, and those grids are inheriting this orient attribute, which means they are making this shape that you can see right here. And that's already it for those breakups. In fact, there's one last step that we of course have to do, because now we just have those, and we obviously only want to have those breakups inside of the crystal. So that means that we have to do another Boolean operation, and it's right here. So in this Boolean operation I'm basically taking our crystal that we had before and those grids that we just created, and I'm setting the Boolean to intersect. So that means that we just get those cracks inside of the crystal. I then apply some normals, and that's it for the breakups. And I think with that we created everything. So I just separated out the individual components at the end. So I created this crystal with the stones, and I created the intersections and the bubbles. And now you can just like right click on it and save geometry, and then you can save it out as a PGO or OBJ or whatever you like. And you can then go to shading and rendering inside of Houdini. Of course you can also do that, or you can take it to Cinema 4D, Blender, whatever you like. And I think with that being said, we are already at the end of this tutorial. I really hope you like it, and I hope you learned something from it, and thanks for watching.